Okay, so um, so now that we've examined the story of Samson and the character of Samson, I want us to go back to that big question that I promised that we discussed, and that is whether Samson is the worst of the judges, whether the book of Judges really chronicles a steady decline in the Israelites' leadership, and in the state of that there's a decline in the state of the nation, and therefore in the quality of the leadership, from the best judges at the beginning to the worst judges, to the worst judge at the end. So, so what's the evidence? So these scholars and rabbis for 2,000 years who have been, oh, there she is. Just a second. There she is. Hi there. Can you hear?
Hi. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
good. Okay, no, you didn't miss a thing. So I was saying that now that we understand the character of Samson better, um, I want to go back to the original question of whether Samson really is the worst of the judges, and whether you have this, whether the book of Judges is a story of spiritual decline in the state of the nation, and therefore in the quality of judges. And so I was just asking. Sorry, could you hear me all this time? Could you hear me all this time?
I can.
Okay, so again, I just forgot to mic myself, but everything I said you could hear.
Yep.
Okay, good. Um, so for those scholars who argue that there is a decline, what's the evidence? You know, what again? I'm not asking you to evaluate whether it's right or wrong. I think you already know that I think it's wrong, but we first need to list the evidence. You know, what's the evidence out there that that the book of Judges is a story of decline in the nation and in the leaders, and that Samson is the worst of the string of judges.
It seems to get more and more individualistic. Like we talked about last time, Samson didn't seem to be interested in the nation. He seemed to be interested in getting what he wanted, in which was sometimes these women he wanted, sometimes he wanted, but it wasn't about the interest of the nation.
Yeah. Okay. So that but that's just Samson. Okay. If we're supposed, if I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that we're evaluating here whether the story about the book is correct. So okay. So if you say that a kind of detachment from the nation
Mhm.
and just pursuing your own personal interests is the mark of the worst judge, can you see a pattern of decline in that kind of non-national or personal
So
mindset on the part of the leader, from starting with Joshua and Ehud, who are obviously the good judges, the beginning of the book? Do you see a progression or a retrogression towards this very individualistic judge at the end?
So if we go back one, Jephthah is concerned about himself and his immediate family, or at least his daughter.
Right.
Don't know much more. So it's a step broader.
Right.
And then if we go toward the beginning, it seems like they are more interested in tribes and more interested in larger units.
Okay, so yeah, so look, there's definitely this thing about the larger units. Okay, under and you can also make the point that you just made about Yiftach and Samson, who, you know, this one's interested in him and his family, Samson isn't even interested in his family, because obviously his family is very much against his marriage with the Philistine woman, and he says, I want her. But in terms of the smaller and smaller units, you're right. Under Joshua, you'll remember the people fought together, all 12 tribes, and one big. Ehud, likewise, the text clarifies that he led a nationwide coalition. If you look at Judges 3:27, the Ehud chapter, Judges 3, verse 27 and verse 30, both say that Israel did this, that Israel fought, okay? Israel, the collective group. Then in Deborah, I don't know if you remember in the Song of Deborah, the second account of the war, she chastises some tribes for not joining Barak's campaign. Okay, she chastises them for shirking their national duty by staying out of the war. Then move ahead to Gideon. His coalition consists of only 4 tribes. You can see that in Judges 6:35 and 7:23. Okay, and then the follow-up to his war is a clarification that other Israelites refused to help him. Remember those 2 towns that he attacked. Do you remember after the war?
Hmm?
So that's in Judges 8. And so he goes to war. So not only is his coalition only a small number of tribes, but then he leads a civil war against, there's a war within the nation. Then the next one, Yiftach, leads not even his own tribe. Okay, remember the tribe of Menashe is to the east and west of the river. He leads only the people of Gilad, people east of the river. Okay, so so again, the leadership, the group he leads is even smaller, not even one tribe. And with him too, after he wages war against the enemy, he wages a civil war against the tribe of Ephraim, because they complained, and it doesn't matter now. But again, a civil war within the nation. And then carry it to the last judge. Samson doesn't lead anyone, not even his own tribe of Dan, not even his own family, nothing. He doesn't lead anyone. It's a solo act. Okay, so that's definitely the personal interest just in my family, in Yiftach, or just in me with Samson. I can see the 2 of them, but I can't see a connection to Deborah or to Gideon. I don't see that in them. But what you said about smaller and smaller and smaller units, you can definitely see a decline in the unity of the people, in the national cause. Okay, so that's one piece of evidence for the traditional understanding of the book. What else would that kind of scholar point to in terms of the spiritual health or the spiritual quality of the nation, the spiritual quality of the leader?
We have what you told us about how many years of peace and quiet they had during his reign and after his reign.
Right.
And we don't have any of that in Samson. We only know that he reigned for 20 years, and that's it. We don't know.
Right.
They don't say that it's peace and quiet after.
Yeah, I'm trying. What was it with Yiftach? How many at the end of his? I'm sure it says, but I just can't see it here. It says that he reigned, that he judged them 6 years, and then he was buried, and then after him somebody else judged, and he judged this number of years. Yeah, so it doesn't say. But it's the first judge, Ehud. It says the land was at peace for 80 years, and then 40 and 40 for Gideon and Deborah, for Deborah and Gideon, and then Yiftach, unless I'm missing it, I don't think it says, and definitely it doesn't say for Samson. So another pattern of decline. What else? And again, if we take these numbers not as, again, exact numbers, but as symbolizing the, how good things were and how long it took for things to deteriorate. So it's just kind of a measure of the fullness of the success. Then again, great success, great prosperity, peace and security and fidelity after Ehud. Still good, but less so under the middle judges, and not good, not sustained after the last judges. Okay, so what else in terms of decline? What other pattern of decline can you point to?
It doesn't seem like there's a judge after Samson.
Right. Yeah. No, he's definitely the last judge. But that's just because, look, he's the last one. But again, you can't. I'm asking about a pattern, like a pattern of decline, because there's judge, and then the last one is the last. But look, if I just say the last judge, he could also be the best judge. Okay, nobody could match him. I mean,
I don't know if
Samuel. Yeah, Samuel was the next judge technically, but okay, go ahead.
So I have this picture of the people doing more and more what is best in their own eyes. But that might be what I said earlier anyway.
Now, look, there is a pattern of idolatry. Okay, so after every judge, there's this, the people did what was wrong in God's eyes, but you can tell that things get worse, that God has had it up to here by the time of Jephthah. Yeah, because at the beginning of the Yiftach story, God says, "Enough. I've had it with you." And when because remember, after after each judge, after Joshua, after Ehud, after Deborah, etc., Gideon, the people are awash in idolatry. They stray from God, and bad things happen, and then they cry out to God, and God lifts a leader to save them. Okay? And the Yiftach story starts with the same pattern, and God says, "No, I will not save you anymore. Okay, I'm not going to liberate you from your oppressor. Go to your gods, ask them to help you." Okay, so you get the sense that things are worse in terms of the idolatry and the faithlessness of the people later in the book than at the beginning of the book. What else? What other kind of decline?
It kind of goes with what David said about being more family, like the family unit getting smaller, but also the community that they're surrounded with. By the time you get to Samson, his people are already the enemy. He has no connection with his tribe.
Yeah. Well, so look, it's not.
So it goes from.
Go ahead.
Talk.
Yeah. What?
I said talk.
I'll
continue later.
Yeah.
If it's...
No. Yeah. So to the point of that the coalition behind the judge gets smaller. You're right that with Samson, not only does the coalition behind him shrink to zero, but also his people, the people of Judah, not his own tribe, but the neighboring tribe, want to hand him over to the enemy. Okay, they want to put him in
Yeah.
to bind him and give him to, so they're kind of
To shackle him. Yeah.
so they're joining the enemy. So it's not just going down to zero, it's going to minus. Okay, but yeah, so
Minus.
so we can just add that to the previous one about how the leadership of the
Yeah,
judge can be
it goes
judged.
with exactly what David said with the family and with the fact that he's becoming the judge is becoming more and more self-absorbed
Yeah,
or fulfilling his interest above the community.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's more of that.
yeah, and it seems that the community sees it that way too. And that there fewer and fewer are following this leader. Okay, everyone follows Ehud, only some follow Barak and Deborah, fewer follow Gideon, and fewer still follow Yiftach, and nobody follows Samson. In fact, they join the enemy. They side with the enemy. How about the quality, the kind of the moral quality of or the national the moral quality or the national spirit of the judge himself? How again would you, if for those people who see a decline, how would they, what would they point to show a moral decline in the leader or moral fault in the leader?
Well, again, like David said about him becoming more self-absorbed.
Right, but okay, so that's Samson. Where do you see that decline?
No, but
from Ehud.
But above him also. But when you go to Yiftach, he's also self-absorbed.
Right, but how about above him? How about
he takes the job?
Yeah, for personal reasons.
He takes the job for his family reason. It's you see the decline there because it's not for him. It's for his daughter so she can get married. So that, and then you get to Samson. He doesn't even worry about a daughter or a son. He worries about himself. He just wants.
Right, just self-gratification. But okay, but where do you see that?
Yeah.
I mean, is it just Yiftach and Samson, or do you see this decline already starting from Ehud to Barak to Gideon beforehand? I mean, I'm asking not necessarily if you see it.
I wasn't here, so I don't know.
but the commentators who point to a decline, what would they point to? So you're right about Yiftach and Samson, and they certainly point to that. But what would they point to in the transition from Ehud to Barak and Deborah, and from Barak and Deborah to Gideon, before we even get to Yiftach?
Would it be something like it gets the leader gets more and more foreign, like more and more removed from? I guess.
So?
Well, when you get to Yiftach, he's got.
Oh yeah, no. But again, Yiftach is easy. Yeah, I get it. Yiftach and Samson, it's easy to make the case. Where do you see a decline going to Yiftach, before Yiftach? Like what did we talk about when we talked about Ehud faces no critique from the biblical author or from the reader. Okay, there's nothing bad. Yeah, a nice kind of gimpy guy who, small guy with his little sword, and in a very plucky way goes and saves the nation. Great leader, great. 80 years of peace. How about Barak? What was the problem with him? Do you remember Deborah's critique? Her point was that you should be doing this. You should lead the people. I'm just this woman, this prophetess, this judge. Okay.
Yeah, he wasn't stepping up to his role.
Yeah, he was this kind of deficient leader, and that he wasn't stepping up to his role. He wasn't going to lead the people in a war that God called for, unless Deborah held his hand, unless she was in his camp. He wouldn't go. Okay, so and he faced critique, and this is not me reading into it. Deborah says it with her own mouth. A woman will get the credit rather than you. Okay, and she chastises him for not stepping up. And then with Gideon faces this a critique from the biblical author, it seems, for becoming kingly. Maybe something about foreign worship, it's unclear, with that ephod, if you remember. And then the fact that his son rules after him as an evil king. Okay, that he kind of created this king-like rule for himself, named his son Avimelech, son of a king, or prince, and then his son rules after him as a king. And then Iftach, even worse, the son of a prostitute, a bandit, a human sacrificer of his own daughter. And so an even worse quality person at the helm. And Samson, we've already covered it. This sex-addicted punk who's completely self-involved. He has no interest and no engagement with his people. He's not a leader at all. And he uses his divine gifts to pursue his own base pleasures rather than to help or to protect or save his people. Okay, so we see spiritual decline in the people in terms of idolatry, spiritual decline or declining in the moral quality of the leader himself, a decline in the state of the nation, again what you pointed to in terms of the shrinking base of support behind what should be a national leader in a national war to fight the oppressor, the outside oppressor nation. And so you see in all these, again, in the spiritual, theologically, in the nation, a decline throughout the book. The quality of the leader, the human quality of the leader, a decline throughout the book. And a decline in the unity of the nation. The political or military unity of the nation declined to nothing by the time we're with Samson. And then on top of that, if you look past Samson to the end of the book, you have those two horrendous stories that you just read. Okay, stories that take all three of these storylines to an even lower point. Okay, the idolatry gets even worse. The leadership gets even more debased, with a priest, a Levite, using Micah's idol as part of Israelite worship. And with the tribe of Dan establishing this pagan-infused worship in their temple up north. And then the division among the people, the lack of unity among the people, gets worse with that story of the Levite's concubine, which leads to this shocking and devastating civil war among the tribes. Devastating to the tribe of Benjamin at least. Okay, so again, if we see decline in all three facets, by the time we get to Samson, all three of them get even worse after Samson. Okay, so this understanding of the book of Judges is a story of constant and of ongoing decline in the nation and therefore in the leadership. This understanding of the book of Judges explains to readers what this bizarre singular character is doing in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, so Samson is this debased man, but he's a metaphor for the nation. Okay? Just like God chose the Israelites to be His people, and they keep resisting and fleeing from that role by forgetting God and worshiping foreign gods, so God chose Samson to lead, and Samson flees from that role. Samson will not lead. Okay? God chose him to save His people, and Samson will not do it. So again, so it's what you'll read when you read about the storyline is that a debased nation produces debased leaders. Okay? And so as the nation declines in its spiritual commitment to God and just in general, It produces this Samson judge who is as low and as debased as you can go. Okay, so the Israelites have reached so low with their idolatry and lack of national cohesion and lack of national spirit that they've produced a moral degenerate, okay, a pleasure seeker and whoremonger who's addicted to foreign women, a man who's in love with himself and is disinterested in his brothers and sisters, a man who throws away God's gift by pursuing self-gratification instead of pursuing the mission God chose for him at birth or at conception. Okay. So these observers or these readers of Judges, they again, to me it's not. It's a strong case. I don't think it's compelling, but it's a strong case. There's evidence for it. You can see all these threads of decline. And yet, I think if you remember reading the story for the first time, whenever it was, I don't think if you put a heart to your hand, I don't think you read it. Okay, actually, I'll put it in the form of a question. Whenever you read this for the first time, did you see it? Did you think of it then as a story of failure? Until some rabbi or commentator or literary scholar instructed you to see Samson as a failure and as an object of scorn and derision, did it occur to you to see Samson that way?
No, he's more like a superhero.
Yeah.
Like he was able to do all these things on his own terms with his own strength.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's it's like a pagan hero in that way, though.
Yeah, well, there's definitely that argument about that he's a pagan hero. Okay, all I'm saying is that was it like that for you, Tal?
Yeah, I didn't see it as a pagan.
Yeah,
more like any other hero that we have, like Yuda Maccabi, or that you sort of glorify for his but his the only thing that always bothers me was the fact that he gave up the goods to Delilah.
Then he gave up his
but
secret.
After which didn't make sense to me until last week.
Yeah.
I just never could understand the story.
Right.
Of.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah,
that's the only thing that bothered me. Other than that, it seemed like a really good story. I mean,
right.
He's
heroic.
Portrayed as a hero from the beginning, from childhood. He kills, the enemy. He's strong. He's.
Yeah, no, and he doesn't, and other than kind of bending to Delilah, he doesn't bend to the enemy ever. Okay, so, and look, I
yeah, and
go ahead.
And he has a lot of like, he believes in himself. He's proud of himself. It's not like by accident that he killed someone.
Yeah,
he knows what he can do, and he goes out and does it, and it's great.
Yeah, and this is like, and I. You can conduct, this is an experiment, a very small sample, but I challenge you to introduce this story to anyone who hasn't read it. It's a short read. Anyone who hasn't read the story and hasn't heard or read commentary about it. Okay. I know from myself, and I know from the few people I've spoken to about it, plus you now. People don't read it as a story of failure until some commentator tells them that Samson is a failure. that Samson is ungodly, that Samson is debased, etc., etc. Okay? Readers don't think ill of Samson as they read the story or as they hear the story. And not only do they not think ill of Samson, nobody who reads the story gets the sense that the biblical author thinks ill of him. Again, until some learned rabbi or professor tells you to see the signs, to see the hidden signs. Okay? But they're hidden, well hidden, in fact. That nobody can find them on their own unless somebody guides them to it. Okay? So instead, just like you said, readers see Samson as someone who succeeds in everything he tries to accomplish. Except his love life, obviously, but he's not alone there. Where a lot of us kind of have problems in that respect. But everything he sets out to do, he does. Okay? He goes from success to success. And the author is never critical of Samson. And God is never upset or angry or disappointed with Samson either. Maybe one exception with that, when he's, after he kills the 1,000 Philistines with the donkey's jawbone, he's struck by this intense thirst, and then he kind of clarifies that this victory is God's, and the problem solved. Water is found. But okay, Samson, you don't sense that God is as critical. The biblical author is not as critical as the commentators not as critical of Samson as the commentators, and God isn't either. Okay? Samson has a direct relationship with God, and God never turns away from Samson. Okay? Quite the contrary, God intervenes to miraculously help Samson twice. Again, with the water and with the temple at the end. Plus, Samson, if you look at the whole biography from conception to death, Samson ends up living up to his destiny, as proclaimed to his mother before his birth. Okay? He starts to deliver the Israelites from the Philistines in spectacular fashion. Okay? So, like the reason people don't see him, don't read the story the way that commentators instruct us to, is that at first glance, first or second, Samson is the Israelites' give me liberty or give me death story. Okay, he's the Nathan Hale of the Bible, or the Eleazar the Maccabee. If you remember, I don't know if you, Tal, do you remember who Eleazar the Maccabee was? Yeah. Okay, so he's the younger brother of Judah Maccabee, and when the Greeks came in, when the Jews rebelled against the Greeks, he attacks an elephant from below with a spear, and obviously the elephant falls on him and crushes him to death. But he sacrificed himself to aid the Jews' war of liberation against the Greeks. Nathan Hale, likewise, this American spy who was executed by the British, and saying that he regrets that he had only one life to give to his country. So, so Samson is that kind of story. Every nation has this kind of heroic figure who sacrifices his life for the nation's liberation. Okay? And Samson, you'll note, is the only judge who dies on the job in the book of Judges, okay? Dying heroically in battle, sacrificing himself on the altar of the nation, like those heroes of Jewish independence in the story of Masada, or in Israel's War of Independence, like the heroes of American independence at Lexington and Concord, or Nathan Hale, or the defenders of the Alamo. Okay, all of these battles or acts of self-sacrifice are are episodes, are national episodes of self-sacrifice that galvanize the nation to continue the fight. Okay, so the heroes of the Alamo are heroes not because they liberated Texas, but because they fought to the death for Texas independence, and that galvanized Texans to continue the fight and win. And the same thing with those who died in the American Revolution, or those who died in Israel's War of Liberations, etc. Okay. And okay, so Samson is this guy who sacrifices himself on the altar of the nation. And I think if you read past Samson, if you move on to the next book, how does the nation's story continue? Okay, what you just read in the beginning of the book of Samuel.
There's that whole there's no king. Everyone did what's right in their own eyes, but they're I don't know, Hannah has this remarkable son.
How is he remarkable? Well, okay, finish that thought. Okay, she has a son, and then what? What happens to the nation? Forget the son. Forget Samuel for a second.
The nation gets a king.
Even before, look, you finished reading before they got the king. You finished at the king, but what happens even before then? In Samuel.
In 8, he appointed his sons judges over Israel.
Right, but what happens to the nation?
They get more and more galvanized.
Galvanized specifically in war, right? I mean, Samuel leads them to war. He leads them to victory over the Philistines.
I guess before that, the rest 11 tribes of Israel were galvanized against Benjamin.
Exactly. This is going to be my point exactly. That the nation joined together in a moral outrage against this terrible act by the Benjaminites. But even if we skip past that, which I agree wholeheartedly, I'm exactly with you. But even if you skip past the end of Judges and just go to what they do in Samuel, here in Samuel 7 and 8, okay, Samuel leads them to war against the Philistines and beats them. Yeah, they strike the Philistines hand over fist. Okay. So you have after this judge, which we're told is going to begin to liberate the Israelites, you get the birth of Samuel, who is, when you said he's the singular, or I don't know if you said singular or miraculous, but what's singular about Samuel?
Well, it's the same story of a miraculous birth.
Same story as what?
Of she being, as what we spoke of in, when did we speak of it? With Sarah.
Well, look, the barren women in the Bible are Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel,
and then with
Samson.
Now with Iftach's wife.
No, Yiftach, we don't even know he had a wife. He had a daughter.
No, so not Iftach. Who was it?
Samson's mother, Manoach.
No, the Naval.
Naval is with David.
Naval's wife. Yeah. So his wife.
No, wait.
With
No, Naval is Abigail. She wasn't barren.
Oh, wait, I'll have to collect my thoughts and I'll tell you who I'm
Yeah.
talking
No,
about.
the barren women in the Bible are the three of the four matriarchs: Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel, and Samson's mother, whose name we don't know, and Hannah. Okay? There's another one later on with Elisha, who I forget the details there, but he gives her he kind of opens her womb. But look, when you see how singular and miraculous Samuel is, you'll see he's not singular. We just finished reading about Samson, a barren woman, a miracle birth, a Nazarite whose hair will never be cut. Samson and Samuel. Okay, and this Nazarite leads the entire nation. This new kid, Samuel, will lead the entire nation, not just a few tribes here and there, the entire nation to war against the Philistines and win. Okay. So you have and again, I just want to clarify what a Nazarite is in the Bible. So in Hebrew, the word Nazarite today applies to Christian monks. I mean, that's the word in Hebrew for a monk. But Nazarites in the Bible are not monks. Okay? He's someone who gives himself to God. And the Torah's laws, they're in Leviticus or I forget where in the Torah, it specifies that Nazarites are not allowed to come in contact with corpses, not allowed to drink alcohol, and not allowed to cut their hair. Okay. Now, in these two cases, the person doesn't give himself to God, but rather his mother gives him to God before the pregnancy. But in any case, so you have two Nazarites here. But the point is, when you read about the birth of Samuel, in, I guess, what is it? Probably Samuel chapter 1. You just read that story a few chapters ago when you were introduced to Samson. Okay? The author compels you to immediately connect this man of God with long hair, who was born miraculously to a barren woman, to that man of God with the long hair, who was born miraculously to a barren woman. Okay, so
but the story is a bit different because with Samson's mom, she wasn't yearning for a child.
Right.
At least we're not told.
Yeah.
And here she's yearning for a child.
That's true.
So it is different.
No,
and it does make you more susceptible to think of it more miraculously because she wants it so badly. And then she gets what she wants.
Yeah, well, look,
and she vows to God. She gives the vow to God of
it's true
child.
It's true that look, here the angel tells her, you'll give your son to God. Okay, or the son will be a Nazarite, will be dedicated to God. And here she promises, look, that guy Paul Borgman that I wrote to you about a few weeks ago points out that the Bible is full of repetitions. Okay? And that the point of repetitions, especially in a story that is told to the ear rather than is read with the eye, is that when you hear repetition, what you notice are the differences. Okay, like if you remember, David, when we talked about the Abraham story. Okay, these 7 conversations that take. There's a repeating element, literary element in the stories, and what it highlights for you as the audience is there's a difference, there's a difference, there's a difference. Or like the repetition in the Binding of Isaac, where we're told what Abraham put on what took with him, the fire, the wood, and the knife, and then Isaac repeats it. What we notice is a difference. Okay? So you're right that there's a difference, but the point is that the author tells you connect this and that, and you can notice the differences. Okay? but the similarities are impossible to not notice. The author practically compels you to do it. Again, these
But
even
that
though these
doesn't make it less. But that doesn't make it less of a miraculous event.
no, they're
The
both
fact that it
miraculous.
just happened, a few years back with Samson.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant that for you,
Okay.
what the authors, obviously the two are miraculous. A barren woman giving birth, that's obviously a miracle. Okay? But what these two men, the strong man and the prophet, the guy who didn't lead anyone and the guy who leads the entire nation, they seem like polar opposites. But the authors of Judges and Samuel tell us to connect these two in our minds. You know? And look, if you compare the intro of Samson's parents, if you go to Judges 13, actually, David, could you read the English translation? Judges 13, verse 2.
Okay, so I have, there was a certain man from Zorah of the stock of Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren and had borne no children. An angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "You are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now be careful not to drink wine."
Okay, no,
or
okay, yeah,
other
okay, that's
intoxicant."
good. Now, read the introduction of Samuel's parents in Samuel verses 1 and 2. Samuel 1, verses 1 or 2.
There was a man from
And again, so let me just repeat. Could you read? Okay, let me translate. Okay, actually, no. You read your English translation of just 13:2. Okay, this is the
13.
introduction of the parents. Okay.
There was a certain man from Zorah of the stock of Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren and had borne no children.
Great. Now, 1 and 2 from Samuel.
There was a man from Ramathaim, of Zufites,
Yeah, of this mountain, Mount Sophim.
in the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroam, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuppah, an Ephraimite. He had two wives, one named Hannah, the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah was childless.
Great.
This man,
That's it. Okay. So again, there was a man from this family. His name was this. His wife was barren. Okay. And here there was a man from here. Gives more of a lineage of son of this, son of this, son of this. He had two wives. One was named this, the other named that, and this one had children, this one did not. Okay? So again, the introduction is similar. Okay? Then the births are highly similar, with the author using the same storyline and the same Nazirite vow in the same words. Okay? In Hebrew, it's verbatim. Okay, the telling of the vow of the Nazirite vow. Okay, same thing. So again, so the presentation is similar in cadence and similar in words, and it tells the same story. Again, a miracle birth to a barren woman. And the child is dedicated to God and will become a Nazirite with those vows. Now, guess how many Nazirites there are in the Bible? Throw out a number.
2.
Exactly. 2 Nazirites.
I was gonna say 5.
Wrong. Okay. This is it. Samson and Samuel. 2 in the entire Bible. And they show up back to back. the last major character in Judges, the first major character in the book that follows. And all of these, again, the introduction of the parents, the story, it's all the same. Okay? So the two are clearly connected. And if we're too dense to connect, the author is basically compelling us to connect them by using all of these, again, similar motifs and similar language to discuss these miracle births, these barren births. Okay. Now we're told that the first long-haired miracle baby Nazarite will start the liberation of Israel, and then quickly, 4 chapters after 3 chapters after Samson's death, we're introduced to this second long-haired miracle baby Nazarite, who very quickly finishes the job. Okay. Samuel rises to prominence. The Israelites unite behind him, go to war, confront their enemies, and overthrow them. Okay. So, going back to this question of how we should understand the book of Judges, decline, with Samson being the worst of the worst, or something else. Okay, so what are we to make of Samson's pairing with Samuel? Okay, Samuel, look, we haven't read him yet, but Samuel is widely considered as one of the 2 greatest leaders in the Bible. Okay, Samuel is second only to Moses in terms of spiritual quality, spiritual elevation, and moral authority, and political authority, and political leadership. Okay. So is Samson really a failed judge, the worst of the judges in the book of Judges, as the rabbis and commentators tell us? Okay. The author of Samuel, the author of the next book, I want to say clearly, but because it's clear to me, but it seems that the author of Samuel did not think that Samson was a problematic or unworthy judge. Again, we've already established that the author of Judges doesn't seem to have a problem, doesn't criticize Samson. It doesn't seem that God criticizes Samson. Okay, so it doesn't seem that the author of Judges is anti-Samson. It doesn't seem that God is anti-Samson. And it definitely doesn't seem that the author of Samuel, of the next book, is critical of Samson. Okay.
And it seems like the decline stopped, because the next one is one of the best.
Yeah, no, but look, that the critics of Samson acknowledge. Okay, the book of Judges is a book of decline. And
yeah, but if there's a moral decline in society, and that's what society gave you, I mean, he gave you rotten leaders.
If a rotten society produces rotten,
is rotten.
Right, then how do you get Samuel?
Yeah.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, and consider in this respect that that Samson, with Samson we get a unique opportunity to judge a person for being a success or a failure, because Samson is the only person in the Bible who is chosen pre-birth to perform a specific task. Okay, so we have this opportunity with Samson we don't have with anyone else, to judge objectively, not whether we like him, whether we approve of him. Look, I might not like Samuel, I might not like Moses, okay, and therefore judge him by my yardstick, which might be different from yours. Okay, but with Samson, there's a yardstick that God established, that he will start saving the Israelites. Okay, so we can judge him objectively, regardless of whether you like him or not. Okay, so God says to Samson's mother, and the biblical author tells us, the readers, that Samson has a special historical role to play in the life of the nation, and that is to begin to deliver Israel from their oppressors. Okay? So regardless of what you or I or your rabbi thinks of Samson's character or his choice in women, we can evaluate for ourselves whether Samson does what he was chosen to do. Okay, there's a clear metric as to whether he was a good and successful judge. Okay, so the question is, did Samson indeed begin to liberate the Israelites? Did he start what Samuel finished? Okay, and so I want us to examine Samson's effect on his people. So first of all, okay, so let's begin with this prophecy or with this dedication. Okay, what does God mean by telling Samson's mother that Samson will begin to liberate or to save the nation, rather than, look, he could have said Samson will save the nation, Samson will liberate. Where is it? This is Judges 13, verse 5. Okay, so you will become pregnant, you will bear a son, not cut his hair, because he is a Nazarite to God. He will be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he will begin to liberate Israel from the Philistines. Okay, so the author, the mission here is to begin to liberate the Israelites, rather than to liberate. Okay, so look, we know that Samson did not liberate the Israelites. Okay, but it was never promised that he would. He would begin. Okay, so the question for us is, what does that mean? What's the difference between saving the Israelites or liberating the Israelites from the Philistines and beginning to liberate them? What does it mean to you, or to any reasonable reader? What does begin mean?
He began to mount a formidable attack against the Philistines. He hurt them, or he was able to hurt them in a meaningful way, whereas that was difficult before him. Because at the end, when he takes down the pillars, he takes down the lords and all the people in the temple.
Look, let me ask this way. Why can't we think that Ehud began to liberate or to deliver or to save the Israelites? Okay, well, because look, we see one judge doing his bit, and then the next judge doing more, and the next, or doing it again, or doing more, and then so if I say Samson began something, which okay, well, let's go from the back to the front. Okay, Samuel finished the job. Okay, Samuel led the people in war against the Philistines and defeated them, and later Saul and David will finish the job completely by really destroying the Philistines and forever establishing an independent kingdom. Okay, so Samuel finished the job. Why can't we say that Ehud began to liberate the Israelites, or Deborah, and Barak, or Gideon, or Yiftach? Why does it, why doesn't it make sense to say that any one of those earlier judges began the job?
They were against the Canaanites mainly. Is there something about the Philistines versus the Canaanites?
Not necessarily even the Canaanites. Some of them were against the Ammonites or the Midianites,
right.
But
it was clearing out the promised land versus holding back the Philistines.
So look, against the Moabites and the Midianites and the Ammonites, it's not in the promised land. It's on the outside. Okay, these are nations who are kind of attacking or oppressing the Israelites from the outside. But that's not the issue. Okay, but so you're right that they didn't fight, I think, the Philistines. Actually, no, that's not true. Deborah had, right? Sisera was a Philistine. Am I wrong? Oh, no. No, you're right. Canaanite. Okay, so you're right. So, but still, if so you're right about that they did not start anything with the Philistines, but with others. But on top of that, why can't you see a kind of progression from judge to judge to judge, in terms of kind of a process of greater and greater Israelite resistance or strength?
They're less and less united. But
Yeah, but they win.
But Samson are the least united.
Yeah, but also look, they win. So yeah, fine, they're less united, but they do the job. They defeat the enemy. They liberate the Israelites, and the land was at peace for 40 years. But still, why can't you say that there's a progression? That Ehud started something, and the following judges continued this process. Look, if you say Joe will start something and Jim will finish it, okay, then what you're suggesting is there's some sort of a process here. That Joe will start some process. Okay, so it's when the angel says that Samson is going to start the liberation of the Israelites from the Philistines, it means that he's going to trigger something. It's not necessarily an event. It's not like a great battle, like Ehud's battle, or Gideon's battle, or Yiftach. But he's going to start some sort of a process. Okay? And when you look at the other judges, at the judges that preceded Samson, you don't see a process. You see kind of a repeating storyline. Okay? This judge galvanized the people, went to war, succeeded, and then 40 years later, the Israelites are back at square one. After they kind of get their dander up and go and fight the enemy under Ehud, 80 years later, we find them once again fearful and defeated and idol worshipping and cowering as the enemy oppresses them and taxes them and hounds them, just like they were before Ehud. Okay? And then Deborah and Barak liberate them. And then 40 years later, there they are again fearful and defeated and cowering and idolatrous, just like before Deborah and Barak. And then the same thing after Gideon. Okay, so after every one of these judges, they're no closer to being free. Okay, so the judge does what he meant to do, and then the Israelites are back at square one. If you think that, again, and remember that the book of Judges comes after, after the story of the desert. Okay, the journey under Moses in the desert. Okay. These Jews in the book of Judges are the same Israelites we saw under Moses. Remember when we talked about the sin of of Korach's clan and the sin of the 12 spies. Okay, Moses and God are like tearing their hair out about, they're frustrated that these people are fearful, cowering, sniveling, running away from a fight, begging to go back to Egypt, afraid to enter the land of Israel. Okay? And these Jews in the book of Judges are acting the same way, except now so under Joshua they came, they conquered with God's help, and here they are in the land after conquering, And we see them acting the exact same way. It's the same people they were back in the desert. Okay? And if you remember, when we talked about Moses, about the sin of the 12 spies, we talked about how we, the readers who know the Bible, who already know what will happen in the book of Joshua, we know that those Israelites in the desert were not actually weak. Okay, because we saw Moses leading them to victories in the battlefield, and we'll see Joshua leading those same people to victories inside the land of Canaan. And the same exact thing we see in the book of Judges. Okay, we see the Israelites are afraid of their enemies. They cower in the face of their enemy, even though that we can see, a few pages later, they can kick the enemy's butt. Under Ehud, again under Barak, again under Gideon, again under Yiftach. Okay, so it's not that the people are weak, it's that the people are afraid. Okay, we can see with every judge. We could see it with Moses in the desert. We could see it with Joshua in the original conquest of the land, and then we can see it with every judge, that the Israelites can create a large united army and fight like heck and overthrow their oppressors. They just don't do it. Okay? They think they're weak. Okay? They're afraid, and therefore they don't resist. They don't mount resistance. They don't fight. Okay? And if after the sin of the slaves, the sin of the spies, when this became kind of apparent, where they said we can't go in there. We'll be slaughtered. We want to go back to Egypt. Okay? Moses at the time observed that the Israelites were still slaves at heart. Okay? And we see that is still the case throughout the book of Judges, as they willingly submit to their enemies. Okay? They're strong enough to resist them, as we can see by the success of every judge, but they choose not to. Okay? And then when things get so oppressive that it's unbearable, again, they don't fight back. They don't rebel. They cry out to God to save them. And God sends a savior. Okay? And you can going back to the shrinkage, okay, from judge to judge, the Israelite coalition shrinks. Okay, so again, as you pointed out, under Joshua and Ehud, the whole nation fights together and wins big. Under Deborah, a number of tribes don't join. Under Gideon, only 8 tribes don't join. Okay, and some Israelites actually refused to help him even when he asks. With Jephthah, 11 and a half tribes don't join. Okay, and in Samson's time, no one fights except for Samson. Okay, and in fact, like Tal said, not only does no one fight with him, in fact, they fight against him. The people of Judah tell him to stop fighting the enemy. And they do their best to deliver him to the enemy, to help the enemy subjugate Israel. It's like in the early days of Zionism, this guy Jabotinsky, who was one of the early Zionist leaders, formed these self-defense units in Russia in the 1880s or 1890s. Where Jews would protect their neighborhoods from pogroms. And many of the local Jews wanted him to desist. They're like the tribe of Judah with Samson. Okay, they feared that having this defiant stance towards these Russian vandals would incite Gentile violence. Okay, and again, this frustration that I mentioned with regard to Moses, or that we as the readers feel, because again, we know that the Israelites were strong enough. It's just that they were fearful. And it's something that Zionist leaders from Jabotinsky to Herzl to Ben-Gurion said all the time, that they believed that what kept Jews from saving themselves was not lack of ability, but lack of belief that they could. It was fear that they're not strong enough, that they don't have the ability. Okay. And so you can see that the Jews in Judges were not too weak. They weren't too weak versus the Ammonites or the Canaanites, as we see with the Judges, and they weren't too weak to resist the Philistines either. They were just scared. Okay. So how can you tell that they were strong enough to defeat the Philistines?
Well, Samson himself takes out a bunch of them.
Yeah, no, but that's Samson. But how can, but and that's not, look, he defeated a bunch of rowdy Philistines he wasn't at war with them. They were in the temple celebrating, and he killed them all by demolishing the building. But how do we know that the Israelite people, when they go to war on the battlefield, can defeat the Philistines when the Philistines are meeting them on the battlefield?
Before they do that?
No. How do we?
How do we?
Yeah. So we who know the future, because look, we read the whole Bible. Okay? But look, you're pointing the answer. Yeah, we can see them doing that in the very next book.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the book of Judges, in the story of Samson, they're afraid. No, Samson, stop fighting. We're going to deliver you to them as a sacrifice so that you'll stop, and we'll have peace with them. And that they'll continue to oppress us, but they won't kill us. And in the very next book, under Samuel, and then also under Saul and David, the Israelites, they kick butt. Okay, they defeat the Philistines. Then the Israelites demand a king who will be their commander, their military commander. And then they go to war against everyone. Under Saul, they defeat the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Amalekites, and the Philistines, which they've already defeated under Samuel. Okay, so all the kings who oppressed the Israelites throughout the book of Judges are vanquished by the Israelites. These same Israelites who were here in the book of Judges are now, in the book of Judges, there's a 90-pound weakling who's abused by everyone. And then at the very beginning of the book of Samuel, they're the neighborhood bully. They kicked everyone's butts. And then under David, they'll overthrow the Philistines and for good. Okay, so we know, just like we know that the Israelites are strong enough in the desert to conquer the land, because we know what will happen in the book of Joshua. We know that the Israelites are strong enough to defeat the Philistines, because we know what will happen in the book of Samuel. It's the same Philistines, the same Israelites. Okay, so what the Israelites lacked in Samson's time was not the ability to fight the Philistines and win, but the belief that they could. Okay, they're scared. They have no fight in them, which they never had throughout the book of Judges. They don't have fight in them, which is why they submit to these foreign oppressors. Okay, they like ever since we were introduced to these people, they're always afraid because they're slaves. Okay, they were afraid to leave Egypt. They didn't want to leave Egypt. They told Moses to stop it. Stop trying to help us. We want to stay. Then they were afraid in the desert and they wanted to go back. Then, on the verge of entering Canaan, again they were afraid and said, no, we don't want to go into the land of Canaan. We want to go back to Egypt. And then throughout the book of Judges, they're afraid to fight. Okay?
If we go back far enough, though, it was since the first incidents with Shechem, with Jacob and his son, or
Yeah,
the sons of Jacob, who
Levi
weren't,
and Simeon, I think.
yeah. And then ever since, it seems like, because then we have the Joseph story after that, and they go down to Egypt.
Oh, you mean that they were
Yeah,
that
they were fighting.
That they were fighters. Look,
Under Jacob.
I agree. Look, they were inside the land of Israel. Before they left for Egypt. Again, they were fighters. They were aggressive. They okay. I don't know if they're aggressive because they're responding to a rape. Okay, in that story, but they have a sense of their strength. They know that they have the ability to attack and succeed against the people of Shechem. Okay? But when we encounter them coming out of Egypt, they're different. They're not like that. They're all the time afraid. Okay? And look, and you can see this again in the Samson story. In the Samson story, they don't even cry out for God to save them. Okay? Earlier in the book of Judges, things are bad, they're oppressed, they cry out for God to save them. In the Samson story, they don't even do that. They just submit to the Philistines. Okay? God elevates a judge. God elevates Samson as a savior on God's own initiative, not because the Jews ask for help. Okay? However, you'll notice that after Samson, it's like a switch. Suddenly, it ends. We no longer see the Jews oppressed and dominated and them wailing and crying out to God to save them. Okay? Once Samson dies, all of a sudden, they're very warlike. Okay, so first, as you just said about those two weird stories at the end of Judges. Okay, in the Micah story, you see the little tribe of Dan, Samson's tribe, setting out north and conquering new tribal land for itself. And then in the concubine story, the Pilegish Bagivah, we see the entire nation coming together to fight and defeat the tribe of Benjamin to avenge that outrage. Okay, so again, Samson's over. Samson dies, and then you see the tribe of Dan going to war. Then you see the entire 11 tribes going to war voluntarily, without God leading them or anything. Okay, and then or kind of elevating some sort of charismatic leader for them. And then in the next book, in Samuel, again, the entire nation together rising up against the Philistines. And even though they lose once, they try again. And when they lose, they try again, and they succeed. Okay, so despite defeat, they succeed. They go on fighting. And then, against Samuel's objections and against God's objections, they demand a king, so this king could lead them in war, more war, against these oppressors. And then they kick all of them, one by one. They kick them out of the land of Israel. Okay, so all of a sudden you see that when you read the story when you read the story before Samson and after Samson, you see this remarkable transformation. When they're constantly, ever since they left Egypt, they're this 90-pound. They're fearful. They're that 90-pound weakling. Okay, and then after, in the last story, in the last two stories in Judges, and then in the book of Samuel and the book of Kings, etc., they're these muscular badasses who kick all their enemies off their land. Okay? The entire nation, again, forming a united army, just like in the days of Joshua. Okay? And not only did they fight the Canaanites and the Philistines in the land, they fight the mightiest empires in the regions, in the region, in the Book of Kings. They fight the Aramaics, the Assyrians, the Babylonians. Okay? And after the Bible's over, they continue. They'll fight the Greek Empire, they fight the Roman Empire. Okay, so there's this real transformation in the character, or at least the characterization of the Israelites. Okay? After the Samson story, they're suddenly a nation of fighters. And they constantly fight above their weight class. Sometimes they lose, sometimes they win, especially against the Assyrians and the Aramaics and the Babylonians and the Romans and the Greeks. But they always take up arms. Okay, so whether they're successful or not is kind of a side issue for us now, but mostly it's just that they have this change of heart somehow. Okay, so maybe Samson's heroics, what both of you were saying, that no, he's like a superhero, like a comic book hero. So maybe Samson's heroics really did start something. Okay, maybe Samson did indeed begin a process which ended in the actual and permanent liberation of Israel under Samuel. Okay, so maybe Samson indeed started some sort of transformation in the Israelites from fearful slaves to fearless fighters. Okay, so Moses couldn't do it. Joshua couldn't do it. Ehud couldn't do it. Deborah couldn't do it. Gideon, Yiftach. But somehow Samson did it. Okay, so if that is indeed the case, if you see this, which I think you do, I think there's this, the people are unrecognizable in the stories and the books after Samson to the ones before. Okay. So if so, then how did Samson do it? How did Samson transform the hearts of these Israelites?
Maybe because he made an act of, I don't have the word, where he sacrificed himself.
Like martyrdom.
Because he could have stayed in the prison cell, like a martyr. He could have stayed in the prison cell and just rotted away. But he chose to be active, knowing that he's going to die with them. And that sort of showed that the people are no longer slaves, but they can take power back into their own hands.
Yeah, look, it doesn't show them, but it's inspiration. Look, we know from our own lives, okay, whether it's in our wars, or the first responders on 9/11, or whatever. We know that the guy who jumps on the grenade, or the guy who stopped the tank at the entrance to the kibbutz during Israel's War of Independence by, again, exploding himself underneath the tank, or Elazar the Maccabee and the elephant. Okay, these are they're dying, or these acts of martyrdom. We don't exactly understand how it inspires others to go on fighting, but we know that it does. Okay, think of Palestinian suicide bomb or Islamic suicide bombers. Okay, they inspire their followers because of their self-sacrifice and their martyrdom. Okay, so we know it works. Yeah, and the same goes for Christian martyrs in the late classical era and Middle Ages. Okay, the martyrdom of Christian saints or of Christian martyrs inspired Christian soldiers and crusaders to go on and fight for that cause that somebody killed himself, was sacrificed himself for. Okay, so Samson is a martyr who died in battle against the enemy. And again, he's the only judge who died on the job in battle. And maybe that's part of his ability to spark and inspire courage in others. Okay, the fallen hero is inspirational. We know this from literature, and we know this from our own history. Okay.
But I think it's more than just that. I think it's the fact that he was imprisoned and he took action.
Yeah.
He wasn't surrendering to his environment.
Right. Look, it's a.
So just like because if you because you said before that the people, it seemed like they were still slaves, that they didn't do this whole journey through the desert and came into the promised land. And so if you think of a slave and you think of Samson, in the prison, it's kind of the same, but he didn't surrender to his
right. He chose liberty. Look, like I said, he chose liberty rather than life. Okay, and like I said earlier about the Samson's story is the give me liberty or give me death story. Okay, and again, you can see the inspirational, how that story, and again, we don't need to get into why, because we're not tracing the psychological process exactly, but we just know from the Alamo, we know from Masada, we know that these stories are inspirational. That they inspires Hannah and her 7 sons. The story of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. Okay, these give me liberty or give me death stories they inspire others to emulate the martyr. And again, the story of the Crusades is a good one in terms of, again, connecting the military effort, our military effort today, to the martyrdom of that hero yesterday. Okay, so definitely the death scene, no doubt, has something to do in this transformation of the Israelites. In them being infused with courage, or with this attitude of give me liberty or give me death, which is not what we saw in the desert. In the desert, they said, we're about to die here. Let's go back to Egypt, to slavery. We choose life, not liberty. We choose life as slaves rather than death as free people in the desert. So definitely the death scene is important, but I think that even before death, Samson was a kind of role model for the opposite, for fearlessness. Okay, he came from a very fearful people, and the smallest and weakest tribe, and he was a role model for fearlessness. And look, when it comes to courage is a mysterious quality. Okay? It's the rarest of the virtues, and we don't know where it comes from, or how to cultivate it, or how to transmit it to other people, or how to inspire it in other people. Okay? It's mysterious. Again, when you read stories of heroism in war or in personal conduct, it's hard to understand why courage appears in some people but not in others, or why this person displayed courage in this setting but not in this setting. Okay, so it's a quality that you cannot teach. Okay, you can teach wisdom or morality or humility. Okay, other virtues. Okay, but courage you cannot. You can't teach it because it's not gained through the mind. Okay, it requires a transformation of the heart. Okay, and so Samson had a gift in this respect. A gift that no other person in the Bible had, not even Joshua. Okay, and in this respect, in terms of, again, the ability to be infectious in this virtue, in this quality, to inspire courage in others, to fix this character flaw in the Israelites, maybe you see here evidence that Samson is not the least, not the worst of the judges, but the best of the judges. Okay. Look, I just want to go back to the birth. Okay, Samson is, as we discussed last time, Samson is on a very short list of characters who were born to barren women, whose womb God personally and miraculously opened. Okay, you just have Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Samson, and Samuel. Okay, and Esau, I guess too. So Samson stands shoulder to shoulder with the nation's leading men who get full and detailed biographies, again, from birth to death, as we discussed last time. He stands with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and Samuel. Okay, these people in Samson, so these other people are really the leading characters in the nation. And Samson is with them. Okay. He stands with those, a smaller handful of, again, national heroes, national leaders, patriarchs, born to a barren woman. Okay. Is it conceivable that this reprobate, this moral degenerate, is there with these Hall of Famers inadvertently, undeservedly?
I would argue that if you're trying to make the case that the people that want to show the downward spiral, that would give you more of an edge to show that he was giving this gift. It just makes the failure, the letdown bigger, because he was given this gift. His mom was given the gift of a child. He was given the gift of life that he wasn't supposed to have because his mom was barren. And he was given this job, this
mission.
Destiny.
Yeah.
This mission that he did not do, that he failed in. And so it makes everything greater. It makes this the loss bigger. The fact that I can argue that case.
Yeah, no, but
I mean, just like you're arguing the other case.
Yeah, no, I can see it, but all fine, except why give him so much space? Look, the Bible is very terse. Okay, he gets the longest story in the book of Judges. Gets a full biography that no other judge gets. Okay, so I can see all your points, that God gave him this, and he squandered it. But why does the biblical author give him so much space and so much character development? Okay, because you can accomplish that without all these, the length of the story and the biographical details. Look, my point is that maybe there's something in Samson that the biblical author saw and that God saw, but that the rabbis and the scholars can't fathom. Okay? Maybe there's a reason why we get more chapters on him than on other judges. Okay? Because Samson achieves what no previous judge did, including Moses and Joshua. And that is liberating the hearts of this slavish, timid nation and transforming them into a free nation that fights for itself. And fights for itself rather than asks God to please fight for us. Please, you liberate us. Okay, we see again after Samson, they fight the Benjaminites. The tribe of Dan, goes and voluntarily fights the Canaanites in the north. And under Samuel, even more so. They demand to fight. They demand a king who will lead us on the battlefield, because Samuel is not enough, apparently, especially as he grows older. Okay, so look, the early judges, Joshua was courageous, certainly, And Ehud was courageous, and Gideon was courageous. Barak, I don't know. Iftach definitely was courageous. Okay? But they did not inspire courage in others. Okay? They led the Israelites to war, but the Israelites then reverted to the same fearful and slavish Israelites they were when they left Egypt. Afraid to fight, afraid to die. Afraid to protect what's theirs. Okay, so look, I don't think you'll get an argument with the rabbis about who was a better person. Okay, Joshua, Gideon were better people than Samson. Okay, with greater self-control, greater civic spirit, greater godliness maybe, not sure, but probably. Better taste in women. But they did not begin the liberation of the Israelites. Okay, they tried to liberate the Israelites. They succeeded for a generation. Okay, but the Israelites were not transformed by Gideon's victory. The Israelites were not transformed by Ehud's victory, or Iftach, or anyone else. And this failure of the previous judges might actually explains why God chose to give the Israelites this singular new kind of judge. Because look, God had tried, again, we saw ever since the desert with Moses, with the spies. God had tried to foster faith and courage and strength in the Israelites ever since the Exodus. Okay? But by providing to them by providing them with miracles, proving that I am with you, I protect you. So don't be afraid. Go where I show you. Don't be afraid that you're going to die of thirst in the desert. Don't be afraid of the Amalekites in the desert. Don't be afraid of the Canaanites. Go in and win. I'm with you. I've proven to you. I've tried to prove to you, to convince you that you have nothing to be afraid of because I am with you. Yet they're still constantly afraid. Before the Red Sea, after the Red Sea, before Mount Sinai, after Mount Sinai, before and before and after the sin of the spies. Okay, so God does whatever he does, and then before they enter the land of Israel under Joshua to fight these scary Canaanites with their giants and their fierce war machines, etc., God performs these two extra special, extra miraculous, extra spectacular miracles to really infuse them with courage to fight. You know, he splits the Jordan River, just like he did the Red Sea, and he collapses the mighty walls of Jericho. Okay? And then in Israel, God gives them these military victories under all these different judges. But as we've just cataloged, these people lose heart at the drop of a hat. Okay? They lose their courage, they lose their faith. They lose their faith in themselves as an army, and they lose their faith in God, and that's why they give their faith to these local gods instead. They're afraid. They're afraid that God won't provide for them. They're afraid that they're not going to be strong enough to defeat the enemy. Okay, so the wailing that we saw under Moses about, oh, why did we leave Egypt? You know, we can't enter the land of Canaan, they'll kill us. We see the same defeatism repeatedly in the book of Judges, time after time after time. Because again, and again, the diagnosis of Moses still applies. These people are still slaves at heart. They don't trust in God's strength, and they don't trust in their own strength. Okay, so for the first time since forever, God doesn't provide them with a courageous leader who will lead them and liberate them, as he did with Moses, as he did with Joshua, as he did with Ehud, etc., etc. Okay? Instead, God gives them this highly unorthodox judge to begin their liberation, to begin this some process by which they themselves will become courageous and strong and liberate themselves. Okay, it's like that proverb about teaching a man to fish. Okay, give a hungry man a fish and he'll be hungry tomorrow again. Teach him how to fish, he'll never be hungry again. Okay? Give the Israelites a courageous general like oh. Hi, David.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I didn't notice that you were gone. How much did you miss?
The Israelites. We were talking about the how Samson was inspired them to not be.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So what I was just saying is that that we see the Israelites constantly. Again, God provides them with a leader, and they win, but they're not transformed. They go back to that same fearfulness that they displayed before him, before that judge, and before Joshua, and before Moses. Okay, and what I was saying to Tom now is that it's kind of like this. Maybe this explains why God gives them this unorthodox judge all of a sudden. He's not like Ehud. He's not like Gideon. He's not like Deborah and Barak. Okay, I was mentioning this proverb about teaching a man to fish. Okay, that if you give the man a fish, if you give a hungry man a fish, he'll be hungry again tomorrow. Okay, but if you teach him how to fish, he'll never be hungry again. He can feed himself. Okay? So if you give the Israelites a courageous commander, when their neighbors abuse them, then they'll always need a savior. Okay, they'll always need somebody to fight their war for them. But if you make them courageous, they'll never be abused again. Okay, and again, I started this last week. That God chooses for this assignment a man from the tribe of Dan, okay, the weakest and smallest of the 12 tribes. The only tribe that did not succeed in settling its allotted territory. The tribe least known for its strength and martial ability and fighting spirit. Okay, this is the tribe that produces the mighty Samson. And maybe you can see here a kind of a pattern that we've seen before, in which God picks the younger brother, the weaker brother, to prevail over the older brother. And Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, Joseph over his brothers. David over his brothers. Okay, so again, maybe here too, a man from Dan, someone from the 90-pound weakling of the 12 tribes, he is the he-man who takes on the Philistines single-handedly. Okay. So, so
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I mean, you might not be able to answer this, but if that's the case, what you just told us about Samson, then why not? I mean, why didn't the biblical writer at the end of the chapter tell us that, somehow close it off in a good way, like he did the previous judges, that he told us that the land was now. So, I mean, if he can't say that the land is now,
right, look,
then he can say,
right. He cannot say that the land was at peace, obviously, because there was no victory.
He can't say that the land was at peace, but he can say that the people were inspired, or he can end it in a way that gives you that kind of warm fuzzy feeling of it wasn't for nothing.
Right. So look, when we talked about the patriarchs,
because he gives you that warm and fuzzy feeling with all the others.
Okay, but how does he give you that warm and fuzzy feeling? Okay,
by saying that the land was peaceful.
Right. But the biblical author, overwhelmingly, I mean, not without exceptions, but overwhelmingly tells a story. He does not explain people's inner lives. Okay, like he doesn't say Leah's feelings were hurt by Jacob. He doesn't say Abraham was doubtful about God. He doesn't say Jacob was afraid.
Sam's
Okay.
mom was.
Yes. So when we talked about the patriarchs, you could see the method of the biblical author. The biblical author is an observer from above. Again, overwhelmingly, there are a few cases where the author tells you what Joe really thought internally, but for the most part, again, I'm not going to put percentages on it, but I'd say like 97%. The author tells you what happens in such a way that you're supposed to understand from Abraham's actions, Abraham's inner feelings, inner thoughts. Or Sarah, when Sarah talks to Abraham about Hagar or about Ishmael, you get the competition. And the same thing with Jacob. Look, how do you know that Jacob is jealous of Esau? Okay, the author doesn't give you an explanation of what Jacob felt. He shows you Jacob's actions, which you, because you have a human understanding, social understanding, you get to read Jacob's character. He's a jealous, resentful younger brother. Okay? And you get to you understand that Abraham is fearful. He's fearful because he's doubtful about God's promise. Okay? And again, characters in general. So I think here as well, this is not that kind of author. It never is. He never tells you, he rarely tells you the character's inner life. And so here too, he's not telling you the nation's feeling. Okay? But he shows you a transformation.
But in the 3 chapters before, the fact that he closes the chapter of the judge
the book of Judges.
No, in each chapter, in each judge's story, where they close off the story by saying, they close it off in a nice package of, okay, now there'll peace in the land. And you talked about the repetition of how it has a significance in a storytelling setting,
right,
where you repeat the same thing with. So for me, it's sort of, I agree that everything points to the fact that he did succeed. Samson did succeed, and it was a good mission. He succeeded in his mission. But the fact that you don't have that some sort of a clothing, the only thing you have is that he reigned for 20 years. He was a judge for 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, that's the only closing you have for the story. It's kind of like it leaves you hanging, because he just died with all these, enemies, and then you're just like,
I agree. Well, I agree that it leaves you hanging. To me, it suggests it's not the end of the story. And what happens the very next, he dies, and then the very next episode, the very next chapter, is the tribe of Dan goes up to the north and conquers land for itself.
So that sort of shows you the transformation from a tribe that wanted him to just, to give him to the enemy because they were so scared of him.
It wasn't the tribe of Dan who wanted to give him to the Philistines. It's a tribe of Judah.
Oh,
but still,
right.
it's a tribe that didn't fight, that couldn't fight. Yeah, and they go and they go to war. The very after he dies, the next episode is them going up north and conquering territory for themselves. And then the next story after that, the whole nation goes to war against Benjamin. The next story after that, the whole nation goes to war against the Philistines. The story after
That
that, the
shows
whole
you a
nation.
development of
Yeah. So
how
again,
it grows and grows and grows.
yeah. So again, you're right that the author could tell us that his death reverberated through the nation, and people celebrated him or were inspired by him to do great things, and therefore they did this and this. And maybe that's how a modern author would do it, because we're maybe more psychologically. Like, I don't think we're more psychologically sophisticated. I mean, I think we're as sophisticated, but
No, it shows the opposite. It shows that we're lacking.
Well, no,
because they could understand it internally, but
Well,
just by not saying, and we need
look,
it said.
I think our authors are much more overt. Okay, so this author can tell us about the internal tensions within Abraham's family without ever going into the heads of Sarah, Hagar, and Abraham. A modern author maybe would do it. I don't know. I think the modern author and that author would want to show the same thing and would understand the same dynamics. It's that we are much more overt, more not obvious, but we spell it out much more clearly. Who knows? Look, maybe you're right. Maybe we don't think as highly of our readers as the biblical author did. Maybe, that we think that we need to spell it out. But I think what you see here is the same thing we saw in those stories, where there's clearly a switch, a transformation in the people. Okay, and it happens here after the fallen hero, the only fallen hero ever, the only fallen hero in Israelite history up to this point. So again, think of if I told the story of the Alamo by saying that Travis and Bowie and Crockett died that day fighting for liberty, and then jumped straight ahead and told you about the story of San Jacinto, and then the next battle, and then the American victory, the Texan victory in that war. Usually, the way it's told is by highlighting the reports of the death of the defenders of the Alamo, the outrage it caused among Texans, how it inspired them to continue the fight, and then you tell the story of San Jacinto, of the next battle. Okay? So it's two different ways of telling it. I think the one where you tell about the outrage of the people and their commitment to now fight is a more modern approach that gets into the head of people, and it's just not the style of the biblical author. Again, I don't know if it's an ancient versus modern or just this particular author. I don't know, but to me, what's striking is the transformation. And just like when we read about David, look, we're not told about David's thoughts. We read his thoughts by his actions or by the plot line. And so I think to me, what I'm doing here, I and others that I follow, is noticing something that the author is putting out there pretty obviously. Again, the connection between Samson and Samuel is obvious. Okay, so we're told, I think, to connect these two stories. Okay, to see, again, we were told that this guy will begin something, and here we see the next guy who looks exactly like him. Again, maybe not as muscular, but again, a Nazirite with long hair, barren mother, fights against the same enemy. Okay, so to me, I see a continuum that the author is calling on me to notice. And the critical difference is, again, that the people are all of a sudden, who are these people? These are not the same people that we've come to know from Exodus up until Samson. So you're right that the story is open-ended. We could interpret it. We could interpret Samson the way I'm suggesting, and we can the way the rabbis are suggesting. The author never tells us, and Samson was a terrible judge. Or, and Samson was a great judge who inspired the people to be great. Okay, the author doesn't tell us anything. So it's up to us to kind of read the author's mind. Okay, you know, what is the author trying to tell us? That Samson is great, or that Samson is a degenerate? Okay, and so I explained to you what makes me read it this way. What do you think? Why do you think the rabbis, over 2,000 years or so now, developed such an antipathy? Like, why did they? If I choose to read it, or if I'm led to read it the way I am, what led the rabbis read the story the way they did, and develop such an antipathy towards Samson as the worst of the judges? If the author doesn't tell you, it's just a matter of me reading the author's hints my way. What made them read the hints that they saw their way?
If the rabbis as leaders of a community are trying to inspire community-based orientation, Samson's not your role model.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas Samuel does unite. There's that stark difference.
Yeah, you're right. He's a look. Samson, for all of his virtues, if there are any, the ones that I highlighted, leadership is not one of them. He's not a leader. Maybe he's a transformative figure. Maybe he inspires courage, but he's not a leader of a community. So that's definitely true.
I guess the other thing it brings up in my mind. So if David can do kind of both what Samson and Samuel do, which one is? I don't know if there is one, but which one is more valued? Which one's more critical?
Yeah. Well, actually, look, I'm not sure that I would equate David and Samson, simply because, look, David is definitely courageous and a good leader, but so was Ehud, so was Joshua, so was Moses. Okay, the unique quality of Samson, to my reading, is that unlike me and you and Moses and Joshua and Ehud and Saul and David and Samuel, Samson could inspire other people inspire scaredy cats to be courageous, could liberate the hearts and minds of people in a way that Moses and Joshua could not. And so David, he didn't have to do that, because the people that he inherited were already infused with courage. Again, those people demanded a king. They wanted to go fight. Yeah.
We're still having those issues with the Philistines, though.
Oh
David.
no! Yeah, look, the defeat of the Philistines, the first to defeat them was Samuel. And then Saul defeated them again. And David defeated them again for the last time. Removed them altogether as a potential threat ever. Okay? But look, the Israelites, it's not that they always win in the book of Samuel. Okay? Sometimes they lose. Okay? But they always fight. And they always demand to fight. Okay? That's the big transformation from Judges and from Exodus and from even Joshua. Okay, they have to be prodded to fight.
It was a combination of the heroic quality, like he had this super strength, superhero character about him, combined with the martyrdom character about him. Because David overthrows a superhero, and when he's a kid, like the David versus Goliath thing, is like a superhero story again. It seems like.
Yeah, but look, but he doesn't become king at that point. In fact, he becomes the opposite. And most of the people, most of the nation, fights against him. The vast majority of the nation fights for Saul in that civil war between Saul and David. Okay, so whatever that fight against Goliath did, look, people liked him, people admired David, okay, but he didn't transform their hearts and make them want to follow him rather than their sitting king.
But then he did something strange like Samson did, is he went and he was intermingled with the Philistines.
Yeah. But again, it did the opposite. It had the opposite effect. It turned the people against him. Again, after David served the Philistine king, he goes to war against Saul's house, and the bulk of the Israelites are fighting on the other side, not with David, not for David. Okay, so he didn't look. David was a great king. David's greatness came about when he was king, his accomplishments. Okay, all I'm saying is that what he did for the Israelites is not the same as what Samson did, because he led them on the battlefield. David led them on the battlefield. Samson never did. David didn't, again, if I'm right about Samson, David never did that. David never took a nation of cowards and turned them into warriors. He took a nation of warriors and just led them from success to success. But look, you're right about the again, going back to why the rabbis, what would lead the rabbis to understand Samson this way, and me to see, I see him the way I see him. But what would lead all these rabbis, successive generations, to read the story the way they read it, given the fact that the author doesn't tell them to. The author doesn't tell me. I mean, I think the author leaves hints for me. But we already established, the declinists, they see evidence too that the author left for them. Okay, so the question is why the rabbis choose to see this evidence and I choose to see the other evidence. And so one is what David said, that the rabbis are communal leaders, and Samson is not an admirable communal leader. Okay. Sorry, what else?
Maybe because he was brought down by a woman, that it was more of a feeling thing and an emotional connection, and it wasn't a strategical death, or a strategic loss. Strategic loss. It was just him, being honest and
or
this
just
whole
being,
touchy-feely sort of.
Look, he is base. He is a womanizer. He is ruled by his passions. Now, we already established this. He does this amazing thing not because he is trying to accomplish some sort of national mission. He just wants to sleep with this woman, or wants to marry this woman, or he's in love. It doesn't matter. But it's a physical or romantic interest that leads him where he's led. Okay, so look, rabbis and scholars and the scholarly commentators over the past 2,000 years, they're erudite legal scholars and spiritual leaders. They're intellectuals. Okay, they're nerds. Okay, and so maybe they relate well to the Bible's more intellectual and spiritual leaders. Okay, the prophets, Moses, Moses the lawgiver, the authors of the wisdom books. Okay, and we can understand that maybe these intellectuals won't relate well to a physical man of action like Samson. Okay? Samson is a kind of embarrassment to the rabbis and the scholars. Okay? He represents a different role model of leadership than they do, both in terms of what David said about leading a community as a communal leader, He's a solo artist. And in terms of what kind of virtues you display. Okay? Humility and intellectual or spiritual and studiousness versus, again, physical strength and physical courage, etc. Okay? You can say the same thing. When we discussed Iftach, we had the same kind of problem. Why do these commentators choose to see him as a human sacrificer when there's the argument against human sacrifice in that story is at least as strong as the argument for it. Okay, and so we can see that, look, both Iftach and Samson were not godly and pious like Deborah or Gideon. Okay? They were rough men. These physical, rough men. They were outsiders. They were people who did not dwell among their people. Okay? They were not one of us. Okay? They were not one of us back then. And the rabbis and scholars and commentators wanted to keep it that way. They wanted us to still see them as not one of us. Okay, so that's certainly, I think, a legitimate explanation to kind of a psychological explanation as to why, psychological and political or communal explanation as to why the rabbis and commentators and scholars reject or choose to see Samson in the light that they do. Okay? And I accept it as legitimate and plausible, but let me argue against this explanation. Okay? Against the notion that the rabbis are scholarly nerds and insiders and therefore have a distaste for alpha male outsiders like Samson and Iftach. Okay. So there's a scholar by the name of Irit Aminov who points out that in early rabbinic literature from the late Second Temple, it's like I forget the dates, but I think she's talking about the 1st or 2nd century BC to the 1st century AD, 1st or 2nd century AD. So she says that in early rabbinic literature, Samson was actually viewed quite positively by the rabbis and the commentators as a kind of precursor or prefiguration of the Messiah, of the Messiah King, who will come in the future to free the Jews from Rome's oppression. So she says that rabbis back then saw Samson as a man of God, again a Nazirite, who remained close to God, had a good relationship with God, and saw him as a worthy leader they saw his give me liberty or give me death kind of heroism as a worthy model of leadership. Okay, again, it's kind of a prefiguration of the Messiah who will come and lead us against and liberate us from Rome. But then the Jews actually fought 2 disastrous wars of liberation against Rome. And the Romans crushed the Jews, and then the second time, so the first is the Great Revolt, and then where they destroyed the temple, and then the second revolt under Bar Kokhba, not only did they destroy Jerusalem, they killed like 700,000 Jews, enslaved tens of thousands, sent the Jews into exile, and so after these 2 crushing revolts against Rome, which were messianic in their political and religious leadership, after then, this messianic thinking, basically the messianic leaders of the 2 Jewish revolts against Rome were recast as villains, as false messiahs. Okay, that they led the Israelites, they led the Jews into a suicidal war that destroyed that threatened to destroy the Jews instead of liberating them. Okay, so you can see that in the wake of those two revolts, the leaders of the first revolt, of the Great Revolt, were cast as the zealots. You remember this from school, I'm sure, Tal. Hakanaim. Okay, that's obviously a critical. The name suggests a criticism of the zealotry of this messianic and misguided messianic thinking. And Bar Kokhba was recast as Bar Koziva, okay, as a son of a lie, as a false prophet, as a villain. And just like Samson, just like beforehand, Samson was seen as a kind of a role model for the future Messiah, who will come and lead us, will liberate us from the Roman yoke. As Bar Kokhba was recast as Bar Koziva, as the leaders of the Great Revolt were recast as zealots, Samson was cast not as a role model for national liberation, but as a cautionary tale of the kind of national destruction that could come about. Okay, so basically, Jewish leaders who had opposed the Jewish rebellions were telling the surviving Jewish communities, "We told you so. Okay, we told you it's suicidal." These are the mityavnim, the what's called the peace party, the party that opposed the rebellion against Rome, and the party, especially in northern Judea, that opposed Bar Kokhba's rebellion. Okay, so after the crushing defeat and the exile, they said, "We told you that it was suicidal to fight Rome. We told you that it's wiser to accept Rome's rule than to fight for Jewish liberation." Okay? And that message hit home. After these two rebellions, Jews indeed accepted their fate for the first time since Samson or since Samuel. Okay, that renewed fighting spirit, that give me liberty or give me death, that all of a sudden you see at the end of Judges and from that point on, in the Bible and after the Bible. In the wars of liberation against the Greeks, again the wars of liberation against the Romans. After the Bar Kokhba revolt, it ends. The Jews internalize that message that we told you so. We told you that it's wiser to accept Rome's rule than to fight for liberation. And from that point on, the Jews indeed accepted their fate as a conquered people. Okay, they gave up, after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, the Jews, for almost 2,000 years, gave up their national aspirations. And in the process, okay, as they made this attitude adjustment of giving up national aspirations, giving up self-government, giving up independence, it's quite understandable that they came to see Samson's legacy in a new and very negative light. Okay, they came to see him not as an inspiration, but as a warning. Okay, so look, there might be something to the fact that a scholar has a hard time relating and celebrating a physical, corporeal He-Man like Samuel, and that a communal leader has a hard time relating to a solo act like Samson. Okay, but it might be something more less psychological and more national. Okay? It might be that the Roman victory over the Jews, the Roman crushing of the Jews, was so complete and so devastating and so painful, and the exile, that the rabbi's message to the Jews in exile was, choose life, not liberty. Okay, if Samson is a give me liberty or give me death story, the story of the Jews in the diaspora is the opposite. Okay? Choose life, not liberty. Okay, so when you see Jews, when the Jews ruled their own land, again, under Samuel, Saul, David, the Book of Kings, Second Temple, etc., when the Jews ruled their own land, they were a normal, self-governing people. And as people with land and government, their image of a leader was an image of a military leader. Again, Joshua, the different judges, different kings, Judah Maccabee, Bar Kokhba. But when Jews were exiled from their land under the Romans, their model of leadership really did change. Okay, because now their safety was no longer in their own hands. And so the image of the Jewish muscular and martial leader, military leader, was replaced with an image of a spiritual leader. Okay, a rabbi, a man of learning, a man of intellect, a man of piety. Okay, that's not Ehud or Gideon or Yiftach or even David. Okay, so this model of so the model of masculine leadership in diaspora Judaism was of, again, the man of learning and intellect and piety, spiritual piety. And this model of leadership could interact quite easily with Moses, with Samuel, with the prophets, but not so well with the Bible's military leaders, like Joshua, the judges, King Saul, King David, and the other kings. Okay? And so, in this respect, it's not surprising if you trace the image of David, for example, or Joshua. Okay? You can see that the rabbis in the classical and medieval eras devoted a lot of energy to recast David and Joshua, who were really the two biggest warlords and conquerors in the Bible, as pious scholars. Okay, they're portrayed in kind of classical and medieval literature as spiritual leaders with a Torah book in their hands, rather than men of physicality and strength with a sword in their hand. Okay, men of violence. Okay, the image of David really, especially, goes through this transformation. Okay, so this is a product of 2,000 years of commentary passed on to us by exilic Jews, meaning by learned spiritual leaders who elevated learning and spiritual leadership over military leadership. Okay. By contrast, Samson remained simply as a man of physical strength and physical action and physical combat. And I think that's what, that's why he remains as the worst of the judges. Until about 100 years ago. Okay, until the Zionists came along at the turn of the 20th century, and the Zionists attached themselves to Joshua not as a scholar of Mosaic law, but as a general. Okay, and they saw Jewish rebels against Rome, like Bar Kokhba, not as false prophets, not as villains, but as real prophets and heroes. And they saw Samson in the same way, as an inspirational leader and a give me liberty or give me death role model, rather than a cautionary tale about foolish, misguided messianic hopes. Okay, does it make sense? So look, I have one more thing, and this is especially for you, David. It's unrelated, but it's an interesting tidbit about our man Samson. And I don't know if you've come across this claim in some modern commentaries. And this comes from academic commentary on Samson, not from religious, not from traditional rabbinical literature. There's some scholars from the approach from biblical criticism. Forgot the word. Sadna, the workshop of biblical criticism. Some claim that Samson was a giant. Okay, and I'm sure, David, you can understand the connection. It's linked to that bizarre claim that he was a demigod, a product of a union between a god and a woman, like Hercules. Okay, so the text never says, of course, that Samson was a giant. Never even gives any. There's no reference to it, and no suggestion of it. The commentators arguing that he was explain the text's silence on this. Why doesn't the text say that he was a giant? And their explanation is that the biblical author scrubbed it out. Okay, that the biblical author took care to hide any references to Samson being a giant because it's too because this too, his giantism, was also a pagan element, just like Samson's name, just like Samson's divine conception. Okay, so again, remember, these are the people who say that fishy story of the wife in the field alone with the angel, that's a cleaned up version of a story of God having sex with a woman. His name, that's again a sign that he is the son of a god and a woman. Again, I told you the problem with that theory. And so the author cleaned up all the pagan elements, explaining where the name comes from, cleaning up that conception scene, and removing any references to him being a giant. But as always, the author did a poor job of hiding things. Okay, so he was the author was, the biblical scholar is too clever for the editor. Okay, we can see the erasure marks. Okay, so the author was able to hide these pagan elements of the archaic story only from those simple ancient readers, those illiterate simpletons, but not from the perspicacious modern scholar. And so the evidence that they point to for the notion that Samson was a giant is in the verse where Samson carries off the gates of Gaza on his back. If you take a look at 16:3. 16 verse 3. Actually, David, could you read the translation just so I'll see if it reflects what it says here in Hebrew?
Yeah, it says, but Samson lay in bed only until midnight. At midnight he got up, grasped the doors of the town gate together with the two gate posts and pulled them out along with the bar. He placed them on his shoulders and carried them off to the top of the hill that is near Hebron.
Great. Okay. So, so do you see what they mean? Do you see a giant here? Can you see what they point to?
He got these doors and gate posts and put them up on his shoulders.
But why would that require?
How do you pull out the posts, or how do you pull them out along with the bar?
Right. Well, so if
No, but pulling them out is just strength. What shows the size of him was carrying them on his back, and you're imagining city city gates, probably enormous because
Right.
they're an
Well,
entrance to the
yeah.
city.
No,
So
look, they're definitely enormous. Okay, that's clear. Okay, but okay. He held it. It's again literally. It says he held the doors literally. So it's not that he ripped one out, then ripped the other out, ripped the doorpost, ripped the other doorpost. Okay, it says, where is it again? Okay, here. It says he held the doors and the two doorposts. Okay, so it means in one grasp he held the doors and the doorposts and pulled them out. Okay, so it's not, the strength we know. He can be my size. He can be like Superman. Okay, he's our size, but he has super strength and he can tear this door, the other door, put them on his back, one on one, and go to Gaza, go to Hebron. Okay, but what they're saying, what these scholars are saying, is that only a giant would have the wingspan to grasp both gates from gatepost to gatepost at the same time. Okay. So, granted, however, you'll note that again, they're saying if you read it literally, it says that he grabbed both doors and the doorposts. If you read it literally, you'll notice also that that Samson. Well, first of all, as Tal said, if when it says he grabbed the doorposts, he grabbed the doors and the doorpost. Theoretically, look, if I tell you that David went to his house and the front gate, the gate to the for the car, for the garage, he took the gates down and the gate posts. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't say at the same time or with one grasp. Since we know that David isn't a giant, we can definitely understand that's these same words as he took the doors, meaning one door, then the other door, and also the gate posts, this and then this. Okay, so a literal reading of the verse allows for Samson being a giant, but also allows for him tearing down the gates one by one. And also, again, if we're going to be literal about it, the items, you'll see that the items Samson grasped included, again, if we're going by the method of the biblical critics here, he didn't just grab these the two gates from goalpost to goalpost, from gatepost to gatepost, but also at the same time the gates, the gateposts, and the and the lock. Okay. So he'd be not just a giant with two hands, but also this lock. Actually, no. I'm sorry. It's not the lock. It's the gateposts. Because so it would require him to take the gates. I'm sorry. The doors down, and at the same time the gate posts. They're listed separately. Okay, which means forearms. A four-armed giant. Okay, so again, if you're going to be literal, assuming that everything was grasped at the same time. Okay, but look, so that's, we can argue about how to read it, how to do a literal reading correctly. Okay, but that's, I think, kind of a side issue. The element, the real element on which this theory rests is David's favorite part of the Bible, of the Torah, and that is Genesis 6:1-4. Like I said a number of times, perhaps the most inexplicable part of the Torah, where the sons of God, or the sons of God, or the sons of the gods, unclear, come down and marry women and spawn giants and heroes. Okay? And as I mentioned in our previous discussions, commentators have tried, without much success, to explain what that means. Okay? But these commentators who point out that Samson is a giant, their idea here is that Samson was one of those giants and heroes. Okay, that he was a pagan product of such a holy union between a god or a son of a god and a woman. Okay, and what's produced, we know, are giants who were heroes. Okay. Now the problem, as I mentioned before, the problem with drawing this connection between the book of Genesis and the book of Judges, 6 biblical books later, is that whatever or whoever those sons of gods were, and those giants and heroes were, they existed before the flood. Okay? Which means that they all died in the flood, many, many, many generations before Samson. Okay? So what we need to ask about this claim that Samson is a giant is, why make this fantastical claim about Samson being a giant, a claim that has no explicit support in the text, a claim that requires a kind of a tortured and maybe even self-contradicting reading of the text, okay? A claim that requires us to believe that the Bible's author would allow a clearly pagan storyline into the most prominent story in the book of Judges, which is the book of Judges is an anti-pagan diatribe, okay, an anti-idolatrous diatribe. Okay. So why venture to make this claim that he was a giant when it goes, why go out on such a ridiculous limb against the plain reading of the text, against the message of this book as a whole, So what explains this innovative theory, which again does not come from the 2,000 years of rabbinical leadership on Samson, but just from the last 150 years or so of more secular scholarship? Like what would lead them to see this connection, or to make this connection and develop this theory that he was a giant?
Well, it would come, I'm assuming, from like higher criticism, which would say that there are different authors, and perhaps there's this author who liked this pagan motif of this kind of superhero demigod type, and wanted to, and Samson is weird here. Like there's nobody else who has a superhuman strength.
Right.
And I don't know where that comes from. And his birth is weird. It doesn't, like, his lineage is weird because of his birth.
Yeah. No, it not only weird, but fishy. It's fishy. You know, as we talked about last week. Okay, is it legit? You know, we saw that Manoach was kind of didn't understand what's going on. The readers maybe don't. Look, my suspicion, I think you're right. I think there have been 2,000 years, 1,800 years of religious commentary on Samson that clarifies, that transmits a sense of Jewish discomfort with Samson among the rabbinical, the religious, the tradition of religious commentary on the book of Judges. Okay, a sense among Jews of the Roman and medieval diaspora that this hero is not one of us. Okay, lo mishelanu, as they say in Hebrew. Okay, he's weird. He's not a Jewish leader. Okay, he's not a Gideon. He's not a Joshua. He's not a Moses. He's not a David. You know, he's debased. He's not our kind of leader. Okay, and that's why they, again, so like I said, 2 weeks now, they see him as the worst of the biblical leaders, of the worst of the judges. Okay, they don't approve of him for whatever reasons. Okay, so that is kind of this discomfort and disdain for Samson has existed in Jewish scholarship for, again, let's say 1800 years or so. If we take Bar Kokhba as the beginning of this reevaluation of Samson. Now, early modern, 18th, 19th, 20th century scholars from the school of biblical criticism, okay, these are people, unlike the rabbis, scholars who see the Bible as a human creation rather than a work of divine revelation. They could find a secular, like a scientific, a biblical criticism explanation for this long-held, centuries-old suspicion that Samson doesn't belong in our gallery of heroes. Okay, so there's this long-standing disdain for Samson, okay, which was based in the religious leadership and religious scholarship in Jewish history, and then come or Hebraic history, and then comes the secular approach to the study of the Bible, biblical criticism, and they retain this disdain, retain this discomfort, but their disdain for Samson, or the discomfort with him, is expressed in biblical criticism language. Okay, so the suspicion that Samson doesn't belong in our gallery of heroes remains. Okay, but for scientific reasons here. Okay, so they argue, the biblical critics, at least the ones who advance this idea that he was a giant, they argue that Samson literally does not belong in our Bible. Okay, this is not a Jewish story. Samson is not a Jewish leader. Okay, they identify the Samson story as a foreign mythos. Okay, likely a Canaanite mythos, certainly pagan, but who knows, maybe even Greek. Maybe it is just a Canaanite translation of the Hercules story. Okay, and so that it's not a Jewish story. It came from the outside, and it wormed its way into our Bible, into the Jewish Bible, because the story was just too popular with ancient Israelites, awash as they were in Canaanite culture and worship. Okay, so all the Bible's authors or editors could do was to try to sanitize. So the story, this Canaanite or Greek or pagan story, was so popular. It's a great story, obviously. So, but it came from the outside. It's not a Jewish story. And so all the biblical author could do was to sanitize it and Judaize it as best as he could. Okay, so it's basically a biblical criticism version of the long-standing rabbinical rejection or disdain for Samson. Okay. But again, it's not a prominent. This idea that he was a giant is a fringe argument, but it's taken seriously in the literature, and it's. I guess I just think it's so outlandish, but these are serious commentators, and you have to say what explains it. And I think the one constant is the conviction that Samson is an outsider. He doesn't belong in this book. Okay. All right. we're finally done with Samson. It took 2 weeks, but it's over. Anything else about Samson? Or any questions?
Not right now.
Okay. So I wanted you to read the concubine, the Micah story and the concubine story, because I think it's important. It's not just some end bit of the book. I think it is part of the message about. There's a characterization theme in the book about the Israelite people. Okay, from the Torah through Joshua up to Samson, and then a completely different characterization after from these last stories in Judges through Samuel and Kings, etc. The story itself is, again, it's the stories themselves are weird. I don't know if I wrote to you, but there's an argument that these are later insertions. Again, this is from biblical criticism, that both of these stories involve elements from David's war against Saul. Okay, so that these are stories that were inserted to give a bad name to Saul's family, to the tribe of Benjamin, to the town, to the city of Gibeah, which is Saul's hometown, and to give a good name to Bethlehem, the story of David's town, and to the tribe of Judah in general. But the location of these stories make this idea makes sense in the sense that these stories come right before the book of Samuel, which is where the story of the fight between David and Saul takes place. Okay, so you get this kind of pre-story in which we're already conditioned to dislike Benjamin, dislike Gibeah, and like Bethlehem, and also the story of Micah and his statue point to the northern kingdom, the town of Dan, involved in pagan worship. In any case, and because we know that that's one of the northern kingdom's temples where there'll be a golden calf, which we talked about before. But again, this is all speculation. Okay, the idea that these are PR stories inserted later on to discredit the house of Saul or to discredit the northern kingdom, I can see the point, but it's speculative. It might be true, but it might be bunk. Who knows? What I'd recommend focusing on is what they tell us for sure, and that is that Dan migrated north and kind of relocated its tribal land from the center to the north, and that there was a civil war between Benjamin and the other tribes, but that the tribe of Benjamin remained as part of the nation, as we will know from what comes next with Saul. Okay, and all the rest, of course, we can speculate and have fun on. But these two things are you don't have to go out on a limb or speculate in order to kind of weave into the historical storyline that there's a relocation of the tribe of Dan, and that there's this war, a civil war within the nation. Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry for taking so long, and no. I'll see you next week, and I'll send you the reading from for next week for Samuel. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.